Pessoal, aí vai o vídeo número 2. Esse aqui foi o número 1, uma trilogia. Esse é o número 2 que eu vou fazer hoje. Esse foi o número 1, CERNE, o portal do inferno em tempos pré-apocalípticos. Agora eu vou para fazer o 2 aí com vocês. E se eu parar só para dar mais uma ilustração, o que está sendo falado aí no assunto. E hoje parece que a voz vai estar melhor dos americanos, porque saiu bem baixinho da última vez, por causa do microfone estava. Mas espero que vocês gostem. O importante é que eu já fiz a legendar para vocês, tá? Bem grande aí, em preto, fundo preto. Quando estava azul, botei fundo preto para ficar bem melhor de se ler, bem mais confortável. Espero que vocês gostem aí e continuem vendo.
You're watching Apocalypse and the End Times. My name is Paul McGuire, and we're going to continue our interview with Anthony Patch, researcher, author, speaker, author of novels such as Covert Catastrophe, Diamonds in the Rough, and he has spent over 25 years researching science and physics, and cosmology, and the CERNE collider and related technologies and sciences. And what he has to share with you is essential for you to understand. It's not theoretical. The research it's ongoing. So I want to dive right back into this interview with Anthony and continue on talking about the CERN collider and its real agenda. Okay, so we're on the verge of a paradigm shift. They've cracked open a portal or doorway or whatever you want to call it from another dimension. By their own admission, they are already in communication with something that has a personality and this ability to communicate. And the information that they're receiving must be very high-level information because they're feeding it to laboratories and technologies all across the planet. And what you said is so sobering. That video on the internet that captured it was an open satanic worship ceremony, I guess, in the Goddard Tunnel. Yes. And I saw it and I was like, my mouth was open because it was so in your face, Luciferian and satanic. I would say we've probably not seen something that bold in the mainstream. No, we haven't. In our lifetime. No. And, there's been an escalation. It keeps getting faster and more bold and more prominent. The Illuminati symbols at the Super Bowls and these giant musical performances in stadiums by music superstars and the Olympics. There are in-your-face occult messages and satanic messages and symbols, which tells you there's a very powerful Luciferian elite in this world, very active, and they're not hiding anymore. They've come out because they've progressed in their timeline to the point where they feel invulnerable and no longer have to look back. In fact, they want to be more bold about it so that they can gather themselves more converts to their way. That would make sense. Yeah, that would make sense because here in the U.S. we have this rise in the satanic churches that are just openly recruiting, evangelizing, which wouldn't have occurred even 5 or 6 years ago. That's correct. Now, you talk about a number of things, and first question, though, I want to ask you, and feel free to be as delicate as you choose or whatever, but talking about how the information distributed to the scientists and others is compartmentalized. So you talk to many of these scientists, and I've talked to some of these scientists, and they have no clue as to what you're talking about. And it was obvious to me talking to some of them that they might have compartmentalized information. Now, you and I would agree that it's kind of Lucifer's organizational structure. It's pyramidal, with Lucifer at the top, and it's on need-to-know basis, kind of like a corporation, where Lucifer is the CEO, the founder, the chairman of the board. So at the highest level, and we know this from reading the documents behind the founding of the United Nations and so many other organizations, these people were disciples of Madame Blavatsky, who openly promoted the worship of Satan. So who would you say, is there an organization or is it a group of secret individuals? Who would you say is running this thing, driving it on a human level? And who is ultimately, I know they're using lower level sources, who's financing this? Right out of the Vatican. Right out of the Vatican.
O Vaticano fazendo tudo.
A figurehead to that we can call it, but he's a figurehead much like any president.
Não falei? É o Pope e o Vaticano, tá
He
vendo?
is the figurehead for the structure. The Vatican finances and creates the governmental controls for the entire world. It doesn't matter the culture or the government. Everybody in lockstep takes their orders from the Vatican. If you were to look at our legal systems, no matter the country, they all derive from the legal system that is put forth by the Vatican. Now they have their minions that are sprinkled out and infiltrated into many organizations like the Illuminati. But the short answer is the Vatican. They worship Saturn, the black sun. If you look at and look for images of Saturn in the clothing, in the adornments, in the temples, you will see representations of Saturn everywhere. This is the satanic worship of their false sun, their false god, Saturn. That is where they derive their energy from that worship of their false god, Saturn. Now, that sounds absurd. Most people would never put Saturn and the Vatican together. But it's easy enough to see. It isn't that occultic. And therefore, who's running CERNE, who's pushing the agenda, comes right out of the Vatican. But at the same time, outside of the organizational structure and hierarchy of the Vatican, there are many Catholics, like the late Malachi Martin and others, another guy who they say he committed suicide, but by hanging himself, but that was very doubtful. Malachi Martin, a Catholic, and I believe he was a Jesuit, warned as a Catholic apologist, he warned of the incense of Satan penetrating the Vatican. What he was saying, as you know, is he was alluding, it was his thesis that Satanism had penetrated the Vatican. We reached an epoch. Right. So you're not saying all Catholics are right. Okay. We're talking about, if you will, a governmental structure, right? A political, or theological structure. We're not attacking people, right? But we're looking at the structure that was assembled and promulgated by Satan himself, and the direct, in-your-face worship of Lucifer, and that hierarchy in that structure. Okay, so it's interesting to me because I get emails from everybody, and you have one segment saying it's the Jews who are responsible for all the evils in the world, and protocols that were in elders of Zion, and some say it's the Vatican, and this whirl of confusion. I don't want to totally get into that. It is interesting, though, that the Vatican has had a number of spokesmen, and I believe the current Pope recently made a statement. Tell me if you know the statement, alluding to the fact of some kind of extraterrestrial alien visitation. Tell our viewers about that. Well,
deixa eu explicar aqui um tempo. O Vaticano, ele controla todas essas instituições que são grupos, né? Maçonaria, a maçonaria dividida em vários setores, entendeu? Em cada lugar que tu vai, tem a Rotary, que é a francesa, e assim por diante. Todas essas religiões ocultas que existem, é o Papa que controla. Acho que ele não controla, que estava na China, que estava na Rússia, que ele, ortodoxo, que ele está querendo, arranjou um acordo com os arquebispos da Rússia para controlar também através de acordo, talvez prometendo alguma coisa para eles no futuro. O Papa, ele é o falso profeta, ele que vai trazer em ascensão o anticristo. E eu acredito que o anticristo, depois, talvez agora que os Estados Unidos vai quebrar a China, os dois vão sair fora. Não sei se vai haver a guerra, gente. Talvez haja, que já estão. E nessa guerra, os Estados Unidos vai sair também com percas, porque essa guerra forte. Eles queriam que os Estados Unidos lutasse com a Rússia, mas os Estados Unidos soube quem era, que eles queriam botar a Rússia na frente do comando da Europa. Então, como os Estados Unidos, o Trump, ele viu que a Rússia não era culpada de nada para mudar o sistema deles e dominar o mundo. E se a China, que tem dinheiro, que a Rússia não tem nem dinheiro para fazer isso. E a China está comprando muitos países, causando muito problema em muitos países com o sistema deles comunista. Agora, te dizer, esse plano tudo veio do Papa. Ele se associou também com os sionistas. Os sionistas são os judeus que não são judeus, e são judeus ortodoxos, que não são judeus que os judeus sempre foram divididos. Não tinha os fariseus, samaritanos, tinha vários deles. Nem todo judeu são escolhidos de Deus, são os que estão, porque eles estão vivendo em pecado também. Os sionistas vivem em pecado. Eles vêm do Czares. É uma área que era da Rússia lá. Eles são religiosos, eles são judeus, não é por sangue, mas porque eles adotaram a religião dos judeus, entendeu? Mas vamos seguir, ele vai dizer aí mais sobre as entidades já estão invadindo o portal do CERNE, que eu vou falar mais dele. Ele falou já no começo, no outro capítulo, agora mais está falando mais. O CERNE é o portal para essas entidades. Assim como ele falou com a Torre de Babel, ele vai explicar aí, e mais outro, que o que foi feito nos passados com os seres humanos para tentar destruir Deus e criar a guerra, que o demônio quer usar os seres humanos como soldado contra Deus. Sabe por quê? Ele sabe que vai entristecer Deus por ter que destruir eles. Entendeu? Nessa missão. Então, o que ele quer é tirar quantas menos almas de Jesus ele puder. É por isso que poucos vão ser salvos, gente. Muitos cristãos não vão ser salvos porque não estão vivendo em comunhão com Jesus Cristo. Então, eu aviso agora, as pessoas têm que cair na realidade agora, porque mais tarde vai ficar mais difícil. Por favor, pega atenção a isso.
He's come right out. The short response is that he said that should we be visited or discover or communicate with, quote, aliens, which is a broad stroke term in itself, he would welcome the opportunity, I'm paraphrasing, to baptize another form of life, aliens. Where is that in the Bible? That's my challenge to him. And there's been a number of, they have as I understand it, some kind of Vatican ambassador, that's not probably the right word, program for ETs. Sure, in the UN, we have a UN spokesperson for the visitation by aliens. That person, I forget her name at the moment, but she is our world representative. Take me to your leader, right, Mario. And then we have a number, and there's been prominent discussions among a whole series of presidents in the last 20 years where this
agenda, this scenario
right.
split up. Ronald Reagan.
Right, yeah, Ronald Reagan, again, Ronald Reagan would be one, and Clinton, and Obama, and a lot of them.
Sure.
So
Those are hints. Those are tantalizing. Little the masses.
okay, little hints. So what do you tie that into the CERN collider, and tell us where you think this agenda is going?
Well, I think we've addressed it to the extent of opening the portal to communicate. Let's talk about maybe someone else that everyone will recognize. That's Dr. Stephen Hawking, one of the most renowned particle physicists in the world, a mathematician.
Okay.
He made the statement, I'll paraphrase, but he said, we're addressing the agenda, the purpose of CERN. He said, you do not want to open this interdimensional gateway because you don't know what's going to come through.
So would you call him a critic of the program?
I would, in the sense of their goal of disturbing the fabric of space.
Right.
Because he said that if we are able to tear the veil, to go to the hadron, the God particle, I'm sorry, I'm losing track. The God particle being a hadron, being a particle that they were trying to achieve the discovery of through the collision of particles. He said that
is that particle called the hadron?
Well, that is a particle, the God particle. I'm losing my train of thought there for a moment.
Let's just suspend that for a moment.
Yeah, Higgs boson. Sorry, got a lot swirling in the head. The Higgs boson.
Oh yes, right.
They allegedly discovered this in the latter part of 2012 and into 2013. He said that if you disturb the Higgs field, which is part of this Higgs boson scenario, you could disturb that enough that you would create vacuums, a vacuum bubble that would envelop at the speed of light, not only this planet, but in the entire universe. Now, this is coming from an eminent scientist, mainstream scientist.
Who's an atheist.
He's an atheist. Right. Now, that hasn't happened. It hasn't played out yet since the discovery of the Higgs boson, and I apologize for the lapse, but what he is addressing is this rift, this opening of this portal, this interdimensional gateway, because he recognizes that there are entities on the other side that should not be in our realm, that barrier needs to be maintained.
Wait, Stephen Hawking recognizes that there are entities?
Yes.
And did he use the word entities or a similar word?
He uses unknown
energies, right? But he's referring to entities
in our parlance.
Okay, in our parlance. So he's concerned about unwanted visitors.
Em fato, deixa eu falar aqui, o Steve Hawking, aquele que era tipo um Einstein, né, de ciências e avançada em átomos, ele, antes de morrer, ele falou que deveriam abortar essa operação que eles estão fazendo aí no CERN, porque ele disse, isso pode acontecer, o que eles querem é abrir uma porta, né, fazer o universo ficar, o universo todo, a gente abrir para o universo todo, entendeu? Furar o bloqueio que Jesus colocou em volta da Terra. Isso é um assunto que eu vou falar depois, qual da Terra plana, que nego chama. E nós temos, na Bíblia diz que temos sete céus. Nós, no patamar daqui até, nós estamos encapsulados, gente, tipo uma bolha invisível. Uma bolha invisível tipo plástica ou plasmática, e ela dá o oxigênio para a gente e mantém o oxigênio e para que a natureza sobreviva. Porque quando Deus criou a Terra, como diz no Gênesis, ele criou primeiro abriu o mar, ele abriu o mar, e do mar ele criou o planeta, e fala também de quê? Base, ele deu uma base para o planeta. O planeta, ele é em cima de uma base. Então, o planeta não é uma bola. Se fosse uma bola, não teria base. O planeta é como assim, côncavo, assim, né? Ou assim, e ele tem uns pés, assim, as bases. Tanto que na Bíblia também diz que os anjos, os 4 anjos ficam E o planeta, Terra, ele é arredondado, mas ele fica dentro de uma escultura, a escultura delineada quadrada, é um círculo no quadrado assim, e ele faz concavo assim, entendeu? Mas é dentro de um quadrado. Por isso que a Bíblia também, além de... E tem as bases, que tem a parte do que se diz que era reis, né? Que não é o inferno, reis é os confins do que ficou Abraão. É onde que as almas tem um enxofre, o confinamento com demônio e tudo mais, e tem a parte boa, até a parte ruim. E o que eu quero te dizer é que essa esfera dentro desse quadrado concava, na Bíblia diz que tem 4 anjos em cada canto do planeta, da Terra. Então, o que quer dizer? Como é que seria 4 anjos nos quadrantes, nos finais da Terra? Se a Terra fosse uma esfera, não teria canto. Então, aí está a prova que a Terra plana existe por causa desses detalhes bíblicos. A Bíblia também diz muitas coisas a respeito, como foi de dentro da água, a expansão da Terra foi Deus criou dentro da água. Você, quando vê o céu é azul por quê? Porque acima uma camada daquelas, entre a atmosfera e coisa, são 3 camadas aqui dentro de chegar à cúpula. Ali, e depois disso está tudo em volta, a água. É por isso que diz que a água, o planeta foi criado na abertura entre as águas, como diz o G. Então o céu é azul porque nós vemos a água que vem em volta do planeta. O planeta ainda está dentro da água, mas está como se fosse uma casa, entendeu? Protegida. Depois vem as partes do céu, né? Do firmamento. É por isso que o nome é firmamento. A outra coisa, firmamento quer dizer céu. O firmamento é o firmamento da Terra. A Terra é um firmamento.
A home invasion, if you will,
Sure.
from another dimension by entities.
That's correct. He's not the only one that's raised that issue yet. Not necessarily vacuum bubbles, but this communication and this opening. So there are enough atheist-oriented scientists out there who've been suppressed, but you can find their statements on the internet. This isn't conspiracy theorist origin. These are mainstream people who are saying, we really shouldn't do this. In fact, the director said,
The director of the Hadron Collider program.
of the Large Hadron Collider, as I said earlier, said, we don't really know what's going to happen when we open this portal, but we're going to try it anyway. We're going to do it anyway. I'm paraphrasing. It's much like when the first atomic bomb was tested at Kennedy.
Yes.
And Oppenheimer's famous statement, I've become God, I've become death, not God, but I've become death. Predating that were the concerns of the scientists at Los Alamos, worried that they would ignite the atmosphere when they detonated the first bomb. So they weren't sure. Now, you can transplant that to the present time. We have the same scenario.
And as you know, as we discussed it earlier, Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, I guess the father of the Manhattan Project, that decision was made at the Bohemian Grove.
Yes.
Heavily occulted society near San Francisco. The same statue of the same Hindu god, Shiva, the destroyer of worlds, was there during the Manhattan Project.
Yes.
And he knew that they were going to crack open something.
He's a practicing Hindu.
He was. Okay. And now, here we fast forward to the Hadron Collider, and as you said, and I see the picture, and if you're a doubter, you can see the picture, it's everywhere. That same Hindu god is just doing this weird dance. I believe it's Shiva.
It is Shiva, the god destroyer, and then the leveling of the playing field, the wiping clean of the slate, right, and then the rebirthing. That's right, 3-step process that she's a duality.
That's right.
Represents. And that speaks to the movement of transhumanism we see today.
Right.
But also the geometry of the statue is replicated in the machine itself in the form of the geometric configuration of the detectors that are analyzing the particles when they collide. Wow. So the geometry is there that speaks to sacred geometry and numerology that's employed here as well.
This deception and what is happening with the collider. You talk about the golden age of Chronos. Just tell our viewers what the golden age of Chronos is.
Well, this is their belief system. This is what is driving this agenda. There's this myth, if you will, that prior to the configuration of our solar system, our planetary alignments and pathways, that Saturn, Earth, and Mars would conjoin. They were enveloped in a plasma envelope, and this is part of the electric universe. Right.
Gente, só mais uma coisa que eu quero falar. O Cronos, aí que ele fala, é um deus grego. O Cronos é da palavra Cronos, é um dos vários deuses gregos, que eles dão nome para os deuses gregos, tudo satanismo. É o deus do tempo. Ele é o deus do tempo. Ele é abaixo de Zeus, mas ele controla o tempo. Ele não é o deus da morte, é o deus do tempo. Então, eles acreditam nesse deus, por isso que é crono, vem de cronologia, palavra em latim.
Part of the electric universe and define electric universe to our viewers.
Well, there is a gravity model of the universe which we can assign to Einstein as a figurehead. And there's an electric model that we can assign a figurehead of Tesla to.
Yes.
Nikola Tesla. Thank you. Who, by the way, in Colorado Springs was his laboratory. Right here where the home of Tesla. So it's perfect that we're talking about this. Wow. Tesla understood that the mechanisms of the universe were electromagnetic. We're talking about electricity, we're talking about magnetism, we're talking about ionized gas filling the void of space, which is the ether that he described. Exactly what we would call plasma today in the laboratory. That's what fills the universe. And so comprised or contained in the plasma are electric fields and lines of magnetic force. This is what holds everything in alignment in terms of the planetary orbits. But specifically, the golden age of Chronos was a time when Saturn, Earth, and Mars traveled together towards the solar system, and then not gravitationally, but through magnetism, electromagnetic attraction. Those three planets, our own included, were drawn into close proximity of the sun. There was massive electrical discharges that took place that disrupted this plasma envelope, that disrupted this conjoining and alignment of the three planets. But prior to that discharge taking place in disruption, the three came together, the other planets in the sun that we know, and there were human beings that observed in the heavens plasma discharges taking place, and the three planets in alignment above the Earth stair-stepped up, and connected by electrical discharges, plasma discharges called burden currents. Now, this is replicated in the Bible and described as Jacob's ladder, this burden current connecting electrically all of the planets, including these two, Mars and Saturn, but also Venus was part of this new alignment. This is all replicated and inscribed in stone, in caves, in pyramids of diverse cultures who allegedly had no form of communication between them across the planet. But you see the exact same hieroglyphs in inscriptions depicting what they see in the atmosphere, in the heavens, the planetary alignments, and these electrical discharges. So that is the foundation for the theory that the universe is electromagnetic, more specifically, as opposed to gravity. Gravity is 10 to the 39th power weaker than electromagnetism.
What you're saying is mind-blowing, fascinating, but you're not. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's not speculation on your part. It's based on research.
That's correct.
And I had the opportunity to converse about some of these things with one of the leading Satanists in the world, really. to, I want to be delicate about what I say, very high-level scientists as well. And we had kind of an intellectual discussion. Brilliant man. And he would agree with most of what he said. He said, to me, the problem I have with Christians is that they don't discuss prehistory. But you just talked about prehistory.
That's correct.
Now,
let me underscore real quick.
Yeah.
Not my belief, their belief. And I assign it to the world of mythology.
Okay.
I don't find this in Scripture.
Okay.
But we do see their practice of their worship of the black sun.
Yes.
You mentioned the Nazis sort of offhand there.
Real force.
Exactly. Civil society.
Right.
So when we look at the hidden agenda, we have to look at Saturn and the worship of Saturn and the Vatican, but we can put it to the science now. And they believe that with the Large Hadron Collider, they can reconnect electrically in a more profound fashion than exists electrically now with Saturn. All the planets, everything communicates electrically already in the electric model of the universe. But they want to establish a profound plasma conduit, I call it, plasma conduit, between Earth and Saturn, because they believe they can tap into both spiritual and physical energies from that planet for their use here on this planet. And it all plays in Saturn.
Right. So we're good. You have so much important information that our viewers have, and we're going to do another interview with you because you just have too much information that people need to understand.
Sure.
This is not esoteric stuff. This is the new normal.
Correct.
You know, anybody goes to the movies, the kids are saturated with this.
Yep.
Stanley Kubrick, as you know, was secretly trying to communicate this stuff about the Saturn satanic cult in his films, especially 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Absolutely.
That was a reference to the planet Saturn.
Yes.
And these black obelisks and alchemical magic, and he was involved in you know, I don't know if you can say good Freemasons, bad Freemasons, but he was obviously involved in some kind of occultic belief system. Yes. But he was very much opposed to this Saturn death cult, as he called it. And he tried to communicate it through symbols and language in his movies. I've done a lot of research in similar areas to you. I want to pick this up on the next program. I don't know what your feeling on it is, but I am convinced that the Tower of Babel was an astrological tablet when they observed the host of heaven, looking for the stuff that you're talking about.
Yep.
But I'm also convinced that the Tower of Babel was an interdimensional stargate or portal which allowed for the entrance of interdimensional beings.
Totally agree with you.
And so when I read your research, preparing for the program a number of weeks ago, I was like, not delighted that this was happening, but it was like,
It was a confirmation.
yes, it's like, oh, here's a man who's done research in this area, and he's coming to this conclusion. So, I mean, this may sound like science fiction to you, but it's not science fiction. It would have sounded like science fiction to have a cell phone and an automobile and a jet 200 years ago. Sure. But the world changed. It's now normal. The world is changing right now, and as Anthony said, we are going through the most radical change in the history of civilization. And in your lifetime, through the Lord Charlie, we will be in this world that you're talking about, and we will be dealing with these realities. So you need to be equipped. And if you're a skeptic, great. Do your homework. Send the show Apocalypse in the End Times to your friends, because intelligent people with open minds, they want to know. They want something substance, and that's a great method of evangelism. So again, I want to thank you for a mind-blowing interview, and we're going to be back with Anthony Patch in the next apocalypse and the end times. I'm Paul McGuire. God bless you. And remember, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind.
Então, gente, é isso aí. Mais um vídeo aí, entendeu? É o segundo, amanhã eu vou fazer o terceiro dessa série aí, que tá... para abrir a cabeça. Amanhã ele vai falar mais coisas sobre... vai falar sobre vacina, tá? Amanhã ele vai falar sobre vacina e vai ser muito legal, porque ele vai falar de tudo que está acontecendo. E esse foi 2014 que ele fez a entrevista. Desculpe, 2016, gente. Já tem 4 anos que essa entrevista foi feita, esse vídeo. Eu nem sabia da existência desse vídeo. Eu só vim ver esse vídeo agora. Recentemente, foi 3 dias atrás. Aí comecei, gostei. Falei, pô, que tal uma entrevista boa? Vou tentar fazer isso para as pessoas se ligarem, né? E começar a ver um ponto de vista diferente. Eventualmente, o estudo clínico será